Americans must understand tariffs' lasting impact. Our economic future depends on it. Research reveals Trump's tariff strategy serves three critical purposes: breathing new life into American manufacturing, creating substantial revenue for much-needed tax relief, and bolstering our national self-reliance in an unstable world. Don't be misled by critics who predict catastrophic job losses, runaway inflation, and destructive trade wars. The evidence, the actual, verifiable facts, tells a compelling alternative story. By focusing on demonstrated economic consequences rather than politically motivated talking points, we can clearly see how these policies will strengthen our economy and restore our global leadership position. The stakes couldn't possibly be higher. Only by examining verified impacts, not alarmist predictions, can we recognize that tariffs may represent not just a policy choice, but a pathway to American economic renewal. What if I told you that something as simple as a tax could start a trade war, reshape global economies, or even alter the price of your favorite imported goods? Well, that's exactly what tariffs are capable of. First, let's break it down. A tariff is a tax imposed by a government on goods and services imported into its country, or sometimes exported out of it. The idea is simple. Tariffs make foreign products more expensive, which is meant to encourage people to buy locally made goods instead. In theory, this boosts domestic industries and protects jobs. Sounds fair, right? But here is the catch. Tariffs can also drive up costs for consumers and ignite political tension between countries. Take the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 as a historical example. During the Great Depression, the U.S. government imposed high tariffs on imports to protect struggling American farmers. But other countries retaliated with their own tariffs, creating a domino effect. International trade plummeted, making the depression even worse. Instead of solving the problem, tariffs deepened the economic crisis. Talk about unintended consequences. Fast forward to the 21st century, and tariffs are still a hot topic. Consider the US-China trade war of the late 2010s. The United States, under President Trump, imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, ranging from steel to electronics. China retaliated with its own tariffs on American exports like soybeans and automobiles. The result? Businesses scrambled to adapt, global supply chains were disrupted, and prices for certain goods skyrocketed. Some American farmers, for instance, faced devastating losses as their products became less competitive in the Chinese market. But tariffs aren't always about conflict. Take Japan, where tariffs on imported rice ensure domestic farmers can compete against cheaper international rice. This keeps Japan's agriculture industry alive, but it also means consumers pay more for rice than they would in places with lower or no tariffs. Sometimes tariffs are part of broader strategies. In 2022, India raised tariffs on certain electronics and components, aiming to bolster its Make in India initiative and encourage tech manufacturing within the country. While this stimulated local production, it also raised costs for companies importing advanced tools and materials. So, are tariffs good or bad? Well, it depends who you ask. Governments see them as tools to protect local economies, but businesses and consumers often feel the pinch in higher prices or retaliatory measures. Tariffs are never just about economics. They're about geopolitics, national identity, and balancing the needs of industries with those of ordinary people. At the end of the day, tariffs remind us that global trade is a delicate balancing act. They can protect or punish, strengthen or strain relationships. And the price you pay on your next imported gadget or bag of rice just might be a reflection of that. Make no mistake, tariffs have fundamentally shaped American history. While they initially create pain, burdening consumers, igniting trade conflicts, and fueling political division, their long-term benefits cannot be overlooked. Time and again, these policies have transformed our industrial landscape and fortified our economic foundation. As we navigate today's complex trade debates, we must remember the essential lesson history teaches us. Effective policy requires the courage to weather immediate challenges for greater future rewards. The consequences of our decisions will resonate not just today, but for generations to come. Fast forward to 2025, it all started in January, when the United States introduced a steep 40% tariff on electronic goods imported from China. citing national security concerns over supply chain vulnerabilities. The move targeted items like smartphones, laptops, and advanced semiconductors, sparking immediate retaliation. China responded by slapping hefty tariffs of its own, this time on agricultural imports originating from the U.S., particularly soybeans and pork. American farmers found themselves bracing for headwinds as their largest overseas customer redirected orders to countries like Brazil. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the European Union made waves with a bold set of tariffs targeting steel and aluminum imports from Russia. This decision was tied directly to geopolitical fallout from the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, aiming to choke profits from Russia's industrial sector. For manufacturers in Europe, however, the tariffs came with an ironic price. Production costs increased, leading many to search for alternative sources of raw materials in Asia and South America. It's a perfect example of how tariffs can trigger ripple effects far beyond their intended targets. Even food shopping turned weird for Albert, an enthusiastic home chef in California. He loved cooking stir-fry for dinner but was outraged to find his favorite wok, imported from China, now cost double its usual price due to tariffs. Out of protest, Albert bought a frying pan instead, and as he struggled to recreate his noodle dreams, he posted on Instagram, "Thanks to tariffs, my fried rice is just rice. Who do I complain to? Congress?" Of course, there are the truly bizarre reactions. Take Tyler, who lives in Florida. He thought the tariffs made everything patriotic, so he demanded every product in his house be made in America. From coffee mugs to microwaves, Tyler went full-blown USA. Fast forward 2 months, and almost half his electronics stopped working. "Turns out American-made doesn't mean better made," he declared, frustrated after having to repurchase his fridge and TV. Then there's the extremely unexpected industry winners. Enter lobster fishermen in Maine. When tariffs on Chinese goods went into effect, China retaliated and stopped buying Canadian lobsters, which meant American lobster exports suddenly surged. One fisherman joked, "It's like someone told China lobsters here have better flavor, but I'm not complaining. A tariff that's making me rich? Heck yeah." As for the losers, perhaps no one was as vocal as people at Tesla and Ford. Manufacturers of cars that use aluminum and steel saw costs balloon, making electric cars more expensive just when consumers were leaning toward greener options. This prompted a comedy-worthy reaction from Randy, a Ford dealership owner, who had to inform customers of price hikes. "You'd think tariffs would lead to cheaper pickups, not higher-priced sedans," Randy laughed nervously as he handed out dealership coupons as consolation. And let's not forget inflation, the silent enemy of tariffs. Everyday folks, like Kathy from Texas, suddenly realized beyond electronics, clothes, and kitchenware, even her groceries felt pricier. In one Facebook post, she shouted to her friends, "First it's my coffee machine, now it's apples and bananas. How am I supposed to live through this tariff apocalypse?" Her husband chimed in, sipping store-brand coffee. "Looks like cheaper caffeine is your new reality." Here's the thing. Tariffs are a mixed bag. Some industries get massive boosts, others fall down the rabbit hole. Companies like Nucor thrive while Harley-Davidson falters. Lobster fishermen toast champagne while dairy farmers cry into their milk buckets. And for everyday people? Well, they adapt. Sometimes reluctantly, sometimes humorously, and occasionally with ridiculous protests like Albert in his frying pan. But for every story, there's a question. Are tariffs truly about protecting domestic industries? Or are they an economic weapon, a shady negotiation tactic? Whatever the answer, one thing's clear. When tariffs change the economy, they don't just change the way we do business. They change the way we live, laugh, and fight over frying pans. They contend that in order to reap long-term benefits, this temporary suffering is required. It could encourage innovation and economic independence by making the United States rely more on domestic manufacture. Early indications actually point to the emergence of new small enterprises seeking to close the market gaps caused by prohibited imports. Consider this. You're attempting to make sense of the situation as you prepare for your annual budget preparation in 2025. Legislators have made the welcome pledge to reduce taxes, which would help both businesses and households. You're optimistic that you might have some spare money to invest, save, or spend wisely. Tariffs, however, are a hidden force that could influence the true meaning of this relief. Let's make the connection now. By reducing taxes on income, assets, and occasionally commodities, tax relief aims to lessen financial obligations. However, if tariffs are still in effect, possibly increasing as a result of international trade disputes, they may subtly reduce the potential benefit of tax relief. How? Through increased costs. Do you recall the electronics you're constructing? Higher tariffs raise the cost of raw materials, which could result in higher prices for the finished product that is sold to customers. While tariffs provide essential revenue that powers government tax relief initiatives, we must recognize their potential to backfire. When improperly implemented, these same tariffs disrupt critical trade relationships and inflate costs across entire industries, directly threatening economic vitality. The consequences? A devastating chain reaction. Job markets contract, wage growth freezes, and consumer spending plummets. Make no mistake, poorly designed tariffs can completely undermine the very tax relief they were meant to support. Tariffs aren't inherently harmful. They're strategic economic instruments that, when deployed thoughtfully, can revitalize domestic industries and strengthen our position in global trade negotiations. However, we must recognize the critical balance between tariff policy and tax relief. Excessive tariffs risk neutralizing the very tax cuts designed to benefit you and your family, potentially transforming what should be complementary economic policies into competing forces that leave hard-working Americans bearing the burden. We must become economic detectives, looking beyond simplistic headlines about tax cuts or tariffs to understand their powerful combined impact on our economy. For business owners, this is not optional. Strategic planning now for these cost shifts will separate tomorrow's success stories from its casualties. As consumers, your vigilance tracking price changes across all purchases, not just major ones, will protect your financial health. Yes, economic policy is complex, but that complexity rewards those who master it. When these tariffs and tax changes fully materialize, the crucial difference will be between those who merely react and those who strategically position themselves to capitalize on the new economic landscape. Don't just witness these changes, leverage them. You need to understand how these tariffs are silently eroding your investment returns. Consider this critical financial reality. The new tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles took effect in Europe, instantly turning what should have been a booming market into a battleground. For months, automakers had rushed to stockpile stock. Zeekr, BYD, NIO, all of them tried to ship as many cars as possible before the cutoff. But now, row after row of unsold EVs sat in Rotterdam's ports, dealers nervously glancing at digital dashboards as sales projections collapsed. Dutch electric taxi companies that had planned to renew their fleets just walked away, unable to stomach the 20% jump in prices overnight. But it wasn't just cars. In March, American appliance manufacturers started to feel the weight of big tariffs on imported steel. Whirlpool and GE, which until recently thrived on a delicate mix of domestic and imported parts, found themselves in a bind. Cost calculations ballooned, and products meant for summer rollout were quietly pushed back for redesign. The result? Construction companies in Ohio reported dishwasher shortages and a spike in repair requests from frustrated homeowners. Even small contractors were squeezed, passing every cent of additional cost onto their customers. Over in Asia, India's decision to slap steep tariffs on certain tech imports, aimed squarely at Chinese smartphone makers, had an unintended side effect. Local consumers, hunting for budget models, were suddenly priced out. Retailers in Mumbai and New Delhi adjusted their window displays, quietly removing dozens of Chinese smartphone models that no one could now afford. Mobile repair shops, once flush with contract work, watched their customer flow slow to a trickle as people chose to stick with old devices rather than upgrade. Then came Mexico. In May, after the U.S. threatened secondary tariffs on goods assembled in Mexico with Chinese components, factories in Monterrey and Tijuana had to pause production. Assembly line workers with families to support were sent home midweek, waiting for clarity that never seemed to come. The city's small restaurants, reliant on hungry lunchtime crowds, reported their worst sales in years. And all along the supply chain, shipping companies and logistics managers scrambled to adjust. On the high seas, container ships started to pile up as customs officials in Europe and the US submitted new inspection requirements. Every shipment now a potential tariff target. The ripple effects reached far beyond boardrooms. In port towns, truckers sat idle. Warehouse staff were called off shifts. What can we conclude about tariffs at this point? They act as economic double agents, bolstering certain economic sectors while damaging others. In actuality, when governments impose tariffs, they leave behind clues that will determine who will benefit and who will suffer in the future. Making precise forecasts is not the goal here. Rather, it is about understanding economic trends before others do. Looking to gain during this time and build wealth? There are a few things you need to pay attention to, which is one, the specific industries that are being affected. It's important to know if these industries decline or surge, and always diversify. Never put all of your eggs into one basket. I know you've heard of the saying. It is very crucial when it comes to tariffs because you want to gain in another area if you lose in one instead of completely lose. The goal is stability. Make sure you are paying special attention and taking advantage of the industries that have great gains. Supply and demand is another big one. What are people doing? Are they selling off in a panic? Is there certain goods that suddenly have a greater demand? All of these factors are very important when making smart decisions when it comes to winning in the economy. How do you feel about these tariffs, and what outcome do you think they will bring? Thanks for watching. Until next time.